So this video is very exciting to make. I haven't seen anything like this on any other courses or content in terms of training videos or courses. So I think this is going to be something quite refreshing and quite new that we'll be able to use in game and to have a good understanding and have a use of some mechanics that we haven't really been able to use previously before these kind of programs. So what we have here is a setup of these stack sizes. They should pop up on your screen anyway, but I'm going to pull them here as well. So we have an under the gun player with 52 big blinds who is a fish. He's a whale, massive whale. We have 18 big blind reg, 42 big blind reg, 15 big blind reg, and 20 big blind reg. So essentially what we've done here is lock the strategies from under the gun. So we can see that this is a massive whale. It says under the gun, but he is essentially in the hijack, so late position. And he is limping 65% of his range. And he is raising 12% of his range. So he's a loose, passive fish. So we go to the strategy here in plain view. We can see that this is what we've node locked his range to be. So he's raising the best hands, he's raising the pocket pairs, and then he's raising a very imbalanced kind of range behind. So like all suited hands, queen seven offs, king eight offs, the kind of huge whale you'll play against. And what we're going to do is see what solver how he wants us to respond against this kind of range and against this kind of strategy. We're obviously not going to be able to have exactly the same post-flop equity realization because we're going to be playing against a poorer player, but it's going to give us a very good indication in terms of which hands and what kind of combos we want to use our approach for our big sizings, for our shoves, for our raise null all-ins, for our limp behinds, etc. So we can see here that when he limps, we are going to play, we're not incentivized to limp behind, we're incentivized to play an aggressive range. So you can see that the three different sizings that we can have here is a 3x raise size, a 3.5x raise size, or an all-in. So the all-in is going to be an 18 big blind jam from the cutoff. So you can see that here from the cutoff, we want to jam pretty wide. We're going to jam deuces, threes, fours, fives, all our suited aces, all these high cards, ace five off, those kind of hands. But then we also want to have an isolating range. So we're going to isolate hands non-all-in, which are going to be suited hands typically. So we're going to isolate ace queen suited, ace king suited, ace nine suited, king eight suited, ace eight suited, tens, jacks, queens, kings for value. Now the reason why we can't go too wide for value is because if we start going really linear for value, let's say we just think, okay, well, I'm against a fish, I'm going to raise all of these hands and 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 these hands, then it's very easy for the big blind to play. It's like, okay, wait a minute, you have so few hands that you're raising for value to get in versus me, and you're going to fold so much, I have an easy response. I'm going to just go ahead and shove over the top, or I'm going to free bet non-all-in. So although we're not playing a heads up pot against the fish, that's something which is really crucial to remember. For 18 big blinds here, we're not playing a heads up pot against the whale. We are playing against three players behind, all who could reopen the action. And you can see here, we're going to get into the button next, but it's going to change. The buttons range is going to be very different to how the cutoff is going to play. Another factor is if we go for a raise as the cutoff and we raise too many hands, then the button gets to start overcalling a lot of hands too, because he has the wheel as the first player. It's going to be a lot easier for him to play. So typically we want to have lots and lots of shoves from the cutoff. We want to punish the limp by shoving a lot. 10-8 suited, 9-8 suited, jack-9 suited, queen-9 suited, all of these kind of hands we're going to use as shoves. But we also want to raise call for value. We want to have a range of, looks like tens plus for value, and then like ace jack suited plus for value. Ace king off going into a jam, because when we shove ace king off, we're going to get called by whichever hands he decides to call with, or when we shove ace king off, people behind are still going to call with ace queens and ace jacks and whatever else, I guess. So this is going to be our raising range for value, and this is going to be our shoving range. In terms of our raises for bluffs, we typically want to go for the best hands that we're going to fold, but on the blocker side. So you can see here, we don't open, say, 7-8 suited, 9-7 suited, 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited. These hands are not going to be high EV opens. We're going to prefer to open hands with blockers because guys behind are going to be jamming somewhat aggressively. So we're going to open hands like king 10 off. I would open queen 10 off and jack 10 off too against the fish. Remember that the EV of every raise is going to go up a little bit because the fish is going to play very poorly versus the raise, poorer than the solver will play. So the EV of anything which is a mix here, like ace four off, ace seven suited, queen eight suited, jack eight suited, queen 10 off, jack 10 off, I'm going to just make sure I raise all of these hands. But I know that I can't go too far out of line, because if I go too far out of line, well, the button who covers us all, he's going to be like, okay, mate, I'm all in with ace deuce off. So I need to be really careful about that. So when he opens, we can just look at the response of the players behind after I isolate. Another thing to note is I have offered a 3.5x isolation size, but we can see that the solver strongly prefers a 3x size rather than a 3.5x size, which is just something to consider. So we go for this size in here from the cutoff, which is going to be an 8% range. So versus the 8% range, we can see that the button has been given an option to call behind, but he's typically not going to have too many of those overcalls. He's not incentivized when it's a 3x sizing to have a lot of overcalls. What he's incentivized to do is just have a bunch of jams. So if he jams ace 4 and gets a hand like king 10 off to fold, or a hand like ace 7 suited to fold, or whatever else it may be, that's going to be a pretty big win for him. He also doesn't want to do too much overcalling, because if he overcalls, his range is very capped. Let's just imagine we're in the button, a huge whale's limped, and then a reg is isolated 3x, and now we overcall the button, except aces, which makes some sense to have for value. It's going to be pretty dicey to just go ahead and isolate a bunch of hands, right? To limp behind a bunch of hands. Let's say we limp all our suited aces, all of these offsuit jack 10, queen 10, king 10, king jack, some suited broadways, some suited connectors. Then the small blind with 15 big blinds. He's like, wait a minute, we have a limp from a passive guy. We have a guy raising who doesn't have that many value hands. If anything, he might be raising too wide with bluffs. And then we have the button who's overcalling too wide. There's 8 big blinds in the pot. I'm just going to go bananas and jam loads. And then because he's jamming for 15 big blinds, it gets to that awkward territory where the button doesn't really want to call off the next 12 big blinds with, say, king 7 suited or 9-8 suited, but he's getting such a good price. Same with the big blind. The big blind's going to have 20 big blinds here to go crazy with. So if the button overcalls too wide, then the big blind gets to just really go bananas, and he gets to go pretty crazy jamming too wide. So this is just an important mechanic to remember and to think about, that if it's gone and limp from a fish and someone's isolated who you're deep stacked with, just because you're deep stacked with these guys doesn't mean you want to call too much, because the guys behind can just shove on you if they're shallow. And the other thing to remember is, if you are the kind of guy who's in the big blind with 20 big blinds, and you have a situation where like a fish is limped, it's gone raised, and then loads of regs are just cold calling from the small blind, cold calling from the button, just punish them in the big blind. Take your high equity hands like 10-8 suited, just shove, someone else will reshove. It's not like you're going to get a freeway all in. If you jam 20, if the situation is raise from under the gun, limp from under the gun, raise from the hijack, call from the cutoff, call from the button, call from the small blind, then when you jam your 10-8 suited, you're going to get it heads up very often. You're going to get it in against, ace king off, and you're going to fold it out 3 ranges, and there's going to be loads of dead money. So that's an important mechanic to realize, and most likely people are going to be over calling from the button here. So just remember, if someone's over calling too much, we have to punish them from the blinds. This is a really, really important thing. So when the cutoff does isolate, we can see the button goes for lots of jams with pocket pairs, high cards. He has some free bet non all ins where he basically commits against the 18 big blind stack. So when he has like ace 5 suited and king jack suited, he's saying to himself, okay, the situation which has happened is, if we go back here, the fish is limped for 1 big blind. The cutoff has isolated to 3 big blinds. Do I really need to shove in 45 big blinds? What benefit does shoving in 45 big blinds do for me? If I shove in 40 big blinds with a hand, let's say queen jack suited, if the whale ever was trapping with like aces ever, it has no frequency here, but if he was ever trapping with a hand like that, then it means that he's going to be able to call my all in. But if he has, say queen 6 suited and it's gone raised to 3 big blinds and then free bet to 8.3 big blinds, he's not going to just start cold calling 7-5 suited or jack 7 suited or whatever it may be. And even if he does, I have queen jack suited, it's fine, like it doesn't matter at all. So this is an important concept to realize, and actually I think it's probably better to do this with our whole range. When we're like 50 big blinds deep with one player and the guy in the middle has 18 big blinds deep, I would basically not shove many hands at all. The only reason why we don't want to go 8 big blinds with all our range is because guys with 20, 25 big blinds behind can start jamming, but that's not going to happen very much at all. We don't need to worry about that. And this stack depth anyway, I think it doesn't matter either. So if we look at the EV difference of a hand like pocket nines, let's have a look. EV difference of folding is 0 because we fold. If we call, it's actually higher EV than to raise non all in but that's only if the players behind are playing the same too. And we can see here that the difference between raising non all in and shoving is going to be pretty similar. So I wouldn't worry about it too much at all. And especially with stack preservation, and especially if someone's range actually is going to have a few aces, a few kings, or if he gambles too much with a hand like ace queen or whatever it may be, that's just something for us to consider as the button to free bet non all in rather than to just jam it in for 40 big blinds, especially if guys behind are. Especially if guys behind are deeper as well, we don't want to have as many shoves because it's not going to be as profitable. So this is how the button should play. The small blind versus the cutoff isolate. With 15 big blinds, there's so much dead money. He's just going to go and jam a bunch of hands. So he's just taking his equity, jamming pairs, jamming. He's basically playing how he would do normally against a cutoff range. So if we look at 20 big blinds here, just pull up the sheet 1 second. So if we look at the sheet here, 20 big blinds and the small blind versus a cutoff open, we are basically jamming deuces plus, suited high cards, ace 8 off, ace 2 suited plus. Here, we're shoving basically the same range. We're shoving the pairs, the suited aces, the high suited cards, and ace 8 off plus. So this is good to see. We basically, as the players behind, if we have a similar stack size as the opener, even though the range is tighter and stronger, he's going to isolate to a larger sizing. So because he isolates to this 3x sizing from the small blind, there's too much dead money. We're just going to go with our hand because when we do get folds, it's going to be even better for us. So that's an important thing to realize here. From the big blind, we do start to have overcalls, but we're going to be careful. Remember the big blind here, we have 20 big blinds. So it's kind of an interesting situation. This is assuming, if you look at this, this is going to assume that when the cutoff raises to 3x and the big blind calls, it's going to have the under the gun guy having some limp raises with certain hands, whatever it may be. So it's important for us to realize that the under the gun is going to play a little bit. The under the gun is going to play a little bit tighter than what we expect. So because of that, as the big blind here, we can overcall some more hands. So like, if we're supposed to call 8-6 suited, we can call 8-5. If we're supposed to call 9-7 suited, we can call 9-6. If we're supposed to call Jack-8 suited, we can call Jack-7. Of course, we can't just start calling like 9-2 suited and Jack-5 off because the cutoff isolation range is so tight here. It's not a wide range, but we're going to get a good price. The fish is going to call very often, and we're going to go freeway, and we're going to be able to have some shoves as the big blind too. So I would call all of these hands, any suited queen. I would call any kind of high cards with good straight draws, so like 10-9 off, Jack-10 off, King-9 off, 9-8 off. Even a hand like, Jack-8 off I would call too. I'd call any offsuit ace that I don't just shove. So yeah, this is how I would play from the big blind. If we look at how the big blind plays in theory, 20 big blinds against a cutoff raise, we can see here that this is a cutoff raise. We're going to be jamming, offsuit ace-x, pocket pairs, and then the high cards. And we can see it's going to be a pretty similar range here as well. So again, we're going to shove a similar range to what we would do in Chippy V versus a normal min-raise sizing from the raising range. So I think this is pretty important thing that we've looked at here. And I'm going to make the cutoff fold. So, and look at what happens when the big blind isolates. Or just look at generally the strategy, right? So the big blind, the button typically here wants to just not have too many shoves. He's going to just typically play this raised non-all-in because he wants to have a lot of these 9-7s and king-5s and king-6s, but having a shoving range here as well is going to work pretty fine. Obviously, you're more incentivized to raise from the button than you are from the cutoff, because when you raise from the cutoff from the button, you're going to be in position for the whole hand. Nobody can cold call from behind. And when we go this 3.5x size, and you're going to see what happens. So the button is going to bet 3.5x. So this guy's called and the button should be 3.5x in. And we can see here that when we 3.5x, the small blind's not going to have too many cold calls, and the big blind is also going to be folding loads of hands. So that's an important thing to look at here. By isolating to this 3.5x size, and the small blind actually gets put into a pretty difficult situation. The small blind's going to have hands like Queen 10 off, Jack 10 off, Queen 8 suited, 7 6 suited, all these kind of hands, and he's facing a very wide range on the button. It's quite difficult for him to proceed like this. So I think it's quite an interesting setup here, and why it makes sense to raise on the button. What we're going to look at next is playing from the small blind. So after undergun raises, we can see that here the small blind only has 15 big blinds. So he still wants to raise the top of his range. That's a really important thing to realize. Even with 15 big blinds, we're still going to raise the top of our range. And then we're still going to have some hands potentially as bluffs. And we can still see here that even though we're out of position, we now still want to use this smaller sizing, similar to the cutoff. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, I think. And in game, I think I wouldn't have the bluffs against the whale. Obviously, this is assuming that the guy does this and does that and whatever, but the hands which are shoving are very important hands to shove. So shoving the 6-8 suited, the 7-9 suited, the Jack 7 suited, the Queen 5 suited, the King 2 suited. A lot of these kind of theories and mechanics come from the heads up part of the course as well. So if you haven't watched the heads up part of the course, watch that as well, because we speak a lot about going all in pre-flop with certain hand classes in these kind of situations. So yeah, going all in with these hands and just taking out equity. And also, if we look at 15 big blinds, if we look at 15 big blind, small blind strategy, let's have a look. So seeing how wide we shove for 15 big blinds from the small blind, we're going to see something quite interesting here that I'm just going to put this down. So we can see here that we shove again pull this down a second, sorry. We shove ace-2 off, we shove ace-2 off here. We shove all the way to ace-king off, we still shove these hands. We shove deuces through to sixes here, whereas we shove deuces to sixes, blind versus blind, but here we want to shove sevens, eights, nines, and tens because there's a guy to act behind us who can share equity here and also be less incentivized to be aggressive because there's the guy who limped from under the gun. So we do less trapping, essentially. We do less trapping with sevens, with eights, with nines, with tens. With suited aces, we do less trapping. So we do a lot more shoving here than we would do in kind of chippy V, 15 big blinds, blind versus blind. We shove all the king 8 suited, we shove king 2 suited, we shove all the high equity queen X suited hands as well. So yeah, good one to realize and compare it to the blind versus blind situation here and understand the difference when there's two players remaining rather than one, and a hand like king 7 doesn't want to share equity against two hands kind of thing. So yeah, from the small blind, I think with 15 big blinds, it's quite intuitive. What is going to be interesting is playing in the big blind. So in the big blind here, you can see that this has changed around now, so I actually need to change the colors because the way that it's set up, that this color will be different to this color. So I'm just going to do it quickly so it's a bit more consistent for you. So essentially what these colors are is the turquoise blue is going to be all in, and then the green is going to be check, and then the PO color is going to be raise non all in. You can see here that we are going to be raising non-all-in similar to the other positions. We're going to be raising non-all-in with nines plus. We're going to be raising all-in with ace-king suited, aces. What's kind of interesting here is that we don't expect to face too many shoves from our opponent. So when our opponent is not going to shove very much, and he's not going to call with many worse hands, we actually start implementing this raise fold range technically. So we raise king 10 suited, but we're not expecting to get shoved on from this passive fish. Like, we don't need to worry about that. But it's very important to realize that these hands here, which are suited, have such high EV as raises that we want to raise and get our opponent to call with hands that we absolutely dominate. And how we can extrapolate this is actually raise these hands too. So ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, ace 9, these are powerhouses. So we're going to raise these hands as well. Even though it says shove, we're going to extrapolate and have a wider range here because our opponent is not going to exploit us. So what we can take away here in terms of theory, in terms of the looking at the tool, is that, okay, it makes a lot of sense actually. With queen 10 suited, if I have 20 big blinds and a fish limps, I don't want to go all in with queen 10 suited because I'm wasting my hand. Why am I shoving queen 10 suited? He's not folding ace queen, he's not folding ace 10. He's not going to call me all in with queen 6 suited. But if I raise queen 10, maybe he calls jack 10 off. Maybe he calls queen 8 suited. So this is a really good a really good thing to look at, and something which I was probably not doing as much in game. So again, remember, we look at the theory, we understand what the theory is, we understand what the benchmark is, we get takeaways, something which is maybe telling us something that we wouldn't do before, and then we expand that further based on exploits, based on population tendencies, based on game flow, based on ICM, based on wherever else. What is important here to realize is, though, these hands here, like 7-5 suited, 8-5 suited, 8-6 suited, these are going to be hands which we just are going to want to shove. So again, coming back to the whole situation with how the small blind plays and how we would play in heads-up poker in terms of big blind, in heads-up MTTs, these are going to be a very, very strong and important hand class that we want to go all in with. So yeah, I've basically covered all the nodes now after limp. Something which we're also going to look at is when the fish raises non-all-in. So you can see here that we've node locked the fish to raise a 12% range too. So what we're going to look at here is the plain view of our opponent raising. So he's raising a tight range. So if we look at the range he's raising here, we can see he's raising sevens plus, suited broadways, and he has no offsuit aces, no anything else going on. So against a really tight range, which is like very nutted, let's have a look at how we should play behind. This is also like something which obviously the fish is going to play differently to how regs would play. But if we want to look at how we want to play against really, really, really tight open raises, this is something which is going to be really good to look at as well. So let's have a look here. We can see here some different stuff. Let's have a look at it in 1 second. I think this is actually pretty fascinating. So versus a super, super tight range, when we're in the cutoff here with 18 big blinds, we just don't want to play many hands. We're playing so tight. We're folding fives, fours, threes, and twos. Again, similar to before, that our range just is going to be pretty. If we do have a hand like fives, remember, we're 18 big blinds deep. If you have pocket fives, like, you're not going to flop well enough. Our opponent's range is too strong to be able to like have over realization of our equity post flop, because we're not going to be able to bluff much because he's going to have such a strong range. So when our opponent's range is so strong, we're so shallow, we play so tight. So suited aces, a lot of the EV from suited connectors like 7-8 suited, hands like ace-2 suited, hands like pocket fives, fours, and threes and twos. The EV of these hands, they come from when we're playing deeper stacked, because we may flop two pair like ace-5 against ace-king on ace-5 deuce, or we may flop pocket fives against ace-king on ace-5 deuce as well. We may flop, like a flush draw, a combo draw, a high equity hand against the top pair hand with 7-8 suited. So these are hands here which do really well the deeper the stack sizes are. But when the stack sizes are shallower, we don't want to have much call in here. And our range can't jam too much. Like, we can't jam the ace-5 suited and stuff like that, because our opponent is opening too tight a range. So if we look again here at this thing here, we're going to look essentially at playing 20 big blinds deep, cutoff versus hijack, and see how we should play. So cutoff versus hijack open, we can see here that we play shove only, so no call, so it's very similar to this. And we shove ace-9 suited plus pocket fours plus ace-jack off. And this is going to be against a range from the hijack, which is going to have, king-5 suited, etc. So now his range goes tighter, we can see that we're folding ace-9, we're folding ace-jack, we're folding king-queen, we're folding sevens, we're folding sixes, we're folding fives. So this is a really good thing to remember. It might be a situation with some ICM, it might be a thing where the guy is just a really tight guy. You see guys on your HUD stats who are really tight. It's important to realize how to play against them. So I think this is a really, really important and crucial thing to realize. The button here is playing extremely tight. So we are 40 big blinds deep effective. So what I'm going to show here is how we want to play on the button 40 big blinds deep against the hijack open, and see how different it is playing against a, say, 28% range versus playing against a 12% range. See if there is a big difference or if there's not. So we can see here that, we call hands like 9-7 suited, 7-8 suited full frequency. We call ace-10 off. We play king-jack off. We play king-5 suited, king-6 suited, king-7 suited, king-8 suited, queen-9 suited, queen-8 suited. So, often I'll see someone fold a hand like king-5 suited when I do a hand history review. And I'd be like, wow, you can't fold king-6 suited on the button. But this shows us, if we are playing a really tight range, and remember, we're playing against a fish now, so these hands are going to have higher equity. But if we're playing against a really tight range, we need to be really careful how wide we're going to be defending here, how wide we can get it in for value, etc., etc. So even ace-king off, 40 big blinds is pure slow playing essentially against a 12% RFI, which is good to note. Small blind here against a raise is do no calling off 15 big blinds. You know, if you do like a, let's have a look here at kind of small blind, 15 big blind versus cutoff raise, let's say. Um, versus cutoff raise, we're going to be only shoving because we're shallow. If we look here versus, say, a 25% raise, we start having a bunch of calls, right? So versus hijack raise, we start having a bunch of calls, so like king 5 suited, jack 8 suited, 10-8 suited, etc. At 20 big blinds versus a hijack, we still have lots of calls. So there is a lot of calling going on, even at shallower-ish stacks. But when the guy's range is going to be so tight, the EV of having Queen 9 suited and trying to flop a pair, it actually starts to go down, and we have reverse implied odds because they're going to be dominated way more often than they would be if they were against a 25% range. If you're not coming up against King 5 suited, or if you're not coming up against Ace 5 off, if you're not coming up against 7-8 suited, then your Queen 9 suited just typically is not going to play pretty well. So yeah, that's something else to realize. I think this is actually pretty fascinating too. So from the big blind here, if you're playing against such a tight range, like a 12% range, we can see here from 20 big blinds, we're folding so much. So when the range is just really, really, really tight, we are going for a very, very tight defense. And this is probably something I overdo. I probably call every suited hand against really tight opens from under the gun. Maybe I call too many of these hands. It's good to see that we want to play really, really tight. And this is not going to be exactly accurate. It's going to be a little bit off, but it just shows us the indication that, be careful defending too much against tighter guys. So, yeah, this has been another good refresher. I think hopefully this kind of whole thing about playing against the tight fish when he limps, playing against a tight guy in general when they raise to, say, a 12% range. I think this has hopefully been good, and this is something which I haven't really seen spoken about too much before, especially the whole limping stuff going on. So I hope you liked it, and this is going to be another video, and I'm going to finish it.